Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 17 du Comité permanent des pêches et des océans. We want to start by acknowledging that we are gathered on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and express gratitude that we're able to do the important work of this committee on lands they've stewarded since time immemorial. Pursuant to Standing Order 81.5 and the order of reference from the House referred to the committee on November 7th, 2025, the committee is meeting to commence the consideration of the Supplementary Estimates B 2025-2026. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se déroule sous forme hybride conforme.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person here in the room or remotely using the Zoom application, and I know that everybody's in person today.
I would like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table to help prevent audio and feedback incidents. And I'd like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And just a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For the purpose of the opening of the discussion of Supplementary Estimates B, I now call vote number 1B under the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. With that, I'd like to welcome the Honourable Joanne Thompson, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as Kaylee Levesque, Interim Deputy Minister, Patrick Amiot, Chief Financial Officer, and Peter Lambertucci, the National Chief Enforcement Officer. And with that, Minister Thompson, we will start with your opening remarks for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it is a pleasure for me to be here at the Standing Committee of Fisheries and Oceans. Canada has the best seafood in the world. Around the world, when people see the maple leaf on seafood, they know they are getting a quality product that is ethically harvested. Canada exported fish and seafood to more than 100 countries last year, and it is one of the largest single food export commodities that we export. There is a global demand for Canada's seafood. Our new government is focused on expanding our markets and buying Canadian to grow the industries that support a strong Canadian economy. This is how we will move forward to a state of reliance, from a state of reliance to a state of resilience, and build long-term prosperity for the fishers and regions that rely on this important sector. For our fisheries, expanding our markets means protecting the tens of thousands of jobs our fisheries support in our rural and coastal communities. Working hand in glove with industry, Indigenous peoples, and coastal communities, we are building stronger fisheries and creating more economic opportunity for coastal Canadians. It starts with consultation. And consultation means that I can make sure that the decisions I take protect and support the fisheries and good-paying jobs. I have been on the wharves hearing from harvesters, meeting with industry, and hearing from workers in our plants. They are the lifeblood of our industry, and I'm here to support their work. In terms of Fisheries Act authorizations, our new government is focused on making more efficient decisions to support major projects of national interest so we can get key products to market while still protecting our fish and fishery habitats. I was proud to more than double the total allowable catch for northern cod this year so fishers could see the benefits from the stock. However, I want to address some comments that have been made in the media about the northern cod decision, and I'd like to talk about the facts. First, northern cod has remained stable since 2017. It is at one of the highest levels in decades and is now one of the largest cod stocks in the world. This year, the estimated spawning stock biomass is 524,000 tons. I set the commercial TAC at 38,000 tons, representing a highly sustainable 7% of the biomass. Assertions made, including that this decision is short-sighted or that the stock is being mismanaged, are absurd. There is something deeply flawed with the thinking that you can't fish 7% of northern cod when it's the highest it's been in more than 30 years, and it is one of the largest cod stocks in the world. To grow our seafood sector, we must have safe and orderly fisheries and enable fishers to fish when the stock allows for it. I also want to speak briefly about fishing seasons and the enforcement of these seasons. Seasons protect the long-term conservation of stocks and make sure that local communities benefit from the fishery. For valuable fisheries like lobster, this principle is critical to the biological conservation of lobster and to our economic success as well. Seasons are in place to protect stocks, fish, and foremost. As minister, I fully support enforcement against illegal fishing. We have invested more resources for conservation and protection operations so they have the tools and support to enforce the Fisheries Act. Let me be clear. Any unauthorized fishing out of season is illegal. This year, in the lobster industry or fishery, conservation and protection officers have seized thousands of traps, released tens of thousands of lobsters back into the water, and inspected dozens of facilities. Boats have been seized and arrests have been made. That enforcement protects the integrity of the fishery and supports the conservation of a stock that is worth billions of dollars to Canadian economy. It is my highest priority to make sure that our fishery continues for generations to come. Owner-operator rules make sure that those who fish see the benefit of the hard work. Enforcement protects our stocks and the rule of law. Science-based management opens access to critical foreign markets. There is too much at stake for our coastal communities to risk these foundations of our fishery. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. And with that, we're going to begin our first round of questions, the 6-minute round, starting with Mr. Small.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to welcome the Minister and officials to this meeting here today. To the Minister, Minister, you spoke of the recovery of northern cod, and a recent study shows that harp seals alone consume 24 times the amount of fish that harvesters take. Do you agree with that study?
So I will tell you that
Do you agree with that?
I believe in science-based, of course, I believe in, if it's science-based, I believe in science-based research, and we have to take our decisions, obviously.
Do you believe do you believe the people that wrote that report?
I believe that we have a challenge with seals in cod fishery, yes.
Thank you. So 24 times the amount of fish that harvesters take are taken by harps, and you've got various other species of pinnipeds, gray seals, hooded seals, bearded seals, ring seals, harbor seals. We got stellar sea lions on the west coast. You know, when you look at the biomass that's being fed, chances are it's not 24 times. It's probably closer to 50 times. So what's been the biggest impediment? Would you say markets for seal products are the biggest impediment to having a legit seal harvest?
And we've certainly
Would you agree with that?
We have spoken about this before, and yes, markets are a challenge.
So thank you very much. So you agree that seal and sea lion populations need to be reduced in order to bring balance to our ecosystem?
Do you support a cull?
No, the questions are from me, Minister. But I support ecosystem balance in our oceans. So do you agree that by bringing down the number of pinnipeds, we could increase opportunities for our harvesters?
I believe that we have multiple challenges in front of us with the seal population, and I am actively having conversations with industry, with Indigenous partners, with harvesters. We certainly need to expand our markets. We need to continue to do the work to find creative ways that we can bring seal product to market, but I believe we have to be very measured in what we do.
Thank you, Minister. So in the recent budget, $108 million was committed to finding new markets for seafood and agri-products. How much of that $80 million will get committed to developing new markets for pinniped products?
So I just want to quickly note that you did vote against that budget, and I think there are multiple conversations happening.
Minister, how much of the $108 million is committed to finding new markets to aid in the rebalancing of our ocean ecosystem?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to turn to my colleague if you have the specific amount. But
just a number.
Yes.
How many million?
We don't have the number.
Okay, so we don't have the number. I will get it and certainly get back to you.
Have you asked that a chunk of that $108 million be committed to finding new markets for seal products?
I am actively engaged in conversations on finding new markets. I am working with industry. We're going back over the work that was in place over the last couple of years to determine what's happened. So I can tell you this is a priority for me.
So what happened at the summit in June with the EU, where Was the trade of seal products on the agenda to be discussed with the European Union in June?
I'm not able to answer that at this time, but I
Why?
certainly
Why?
can clarify.
Why not?
I
Why
was not at that meeting. I can
Well,
ask.
if you're pushing for markets for seal products, would you not have pushed to have seal products on the agenda with the Europeans in June?
I think we need to be very mindful that at the moment, Mr. Small, as you know, we are very concerned with some of our export markets. There are significant challenges for seafood industry with tariffs in both China and the U.S., and we need to move forward with caution. I certainly am not, while I want to support the industry and will continue to support the industry.
So why did so we have information from some of our European friends that your boss, Prime Minister Carney, actually removed seal products from the agenda. It was there. And that he himself removed that topic of conversation. Why would he have done that?
Mr. Small, I can't speak for the Prime Minister. He's well able to speak for himself, but I will tell you that I am open to solutions, but solutions that won't further stress.
But why didn't you dig in your heels?
challenges.
Why didn't you dig in your heels and stop the Prime Minister? Why didn't you stand up for your industry and not let him remove the trade of seal products from that agenda?
While this may make interesting video for you later, the fact is I am here to support the industry. I am working to support the industry. We are in a trade challenge, and we all need to be very careful that there's complexities at tables, and to simplify something that's very complex is problematic.
The number one priority of the Fisheries Act is conservation. So, with the massive amounts of fish and shellfish that are consumed by those seals, possibly up to 50 times what harvesters take, the Fisheries Act is failing in terms of an ecosystem approach.
Just a short answer, please, because we're at time.
I want to also stress that I am very aware of the capelin numbers, and that's also a stress on the stock. And we have to look at the entire ecosystems, and it certainly guides us going forward, and I want to reassure people this is a priority.
Thank you very much, Mr. Small. Next, we're moving to Mr. Connors for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, and other officials for coming out today. Nice to be able to have a chat with you. Minister, I'm going to start off by talking. You spoke about the northern cod quota. I want a lot of residents, constituents in my there are asking about the recreational food fishery and how the increased cod quotas is going to impact their ability to be able to go out and catch some cod. Recently, the department put out a survey to be able to consult with residents and constituents in order to find out which is the best way to go forward. Is there any particular reason why you went with an online survey as opposed to an in-person survey?
Thank you for the question. I went with the online survey because I am sincerely interested in feedback from people who I know enjoy the food fishery and know how culturally important it is for us as a province. So the survey is intended to really dig a bit deeper and get as much information as we possibly can from, again, the Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who really hold the food fishery as an important part of our lives. I will say to you, and I'm very pleased to say this, it's only been open 2 weeks and there's over 7,000 people who have participated. So I know we will get rich information from the survey that will certainly guide decisions going forward, and that's the intent. I also encourage people who find the survey challenging, maybe there's somebody else who could fill in the information, or please write to me, email me, and as we move forward, I will find an opportunity that's more general to be able to be in direct contact. The challenge with individual meetings is, you know, we are here in Ottawa. We've been here in Ottawa for a number of weeks. It's just really difficult for me to be able to physically be in all of the places in the province, and if I really want, and Labrador included, and so if I want to be able to reach the maximum number of Newfoundland and Labrador residents, the survey is the most comprehensive way to do that. And I think anyone who's filled out the survey knows that it is quite in-depth, because that's the information that's going to help me in decision-making.
And the data collected from that survey will be used to make a decision on the upcoming
Absolutely. This is a sincere intent to understand people's concerns, what they would like to see happen, and it will be the backbone of what we do going forward. And I'm happy to share the survey once, you know, it's closed and we've put it together. This is intended to be a process that really is very much based on what we all hold dear, the food fishery.
My next question is around the movement of Coast Guard to defence and how that impacted your budget this year, and will it have any impacts on research science and the data that we collect through the Coast Guard?
And thank you, and actually I really appreciate the question, and I'll turn to my colleague, the acting deputy, in a moment, but I want to reassure people that the work of Coast Guard, the day-to-day work of Coast Guard continues. I remain in touch with them. It's a central part to supports for the industry. The move to D&D was very specific around the ability to leverage the fact that Coast Guard is in all of our waterways. And as we focus on defense, of course, we want to be able to support the ability for surveillance and secure communication. But the work of Coast Guard remains unchanged. And I don't know, Deputy, if you have anything you want to add.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for the question. We continue. We have 30 years of collaboration with the Canadian Coast Guard and far beyond its initial transfer to DFO. And those arrangements, both relationships and the close work on icebreaking, whether in small craft harbors, looking at scientific activities, will absolutely continue. We continue to work with them day in, day out in a variety of activities, interdepartmental meetings, and also the deep integration, both in Ottawa but also in the regions where the presence is most strongly integrated. Thank you.
My last, or not my last, well, it could be my last. The Budget 2025 states that to meet the target of 15% in savings over 3 years, Fisheries and Oceans will leverage artificial intelligence and other digital tools to modernise Canada's fisheries management system. This year we introduced logbooks, e-logbooks, and we did have some fishermen who were concerned about that, the new technology. What type of artificial intelligence and digital tools are we looking at to introduce, and how will it impact fishery?
I'll start, and then again I'll turn to the acting deputy. But part of the process is modernizing some of the more laborious processes. Right? You know, we are in a digital age, so of course we want to maintain the advantages of that in terms of being able to ensure that we're moving in a much more focused and timely manner. I do want to say on the e-logs, which I believe are incredibly important for us, especially as we move to expanded markets. I want to thank the harvesters that participated. I want to thank all of the supports to the harvesters in Newfoundland and Labrador, the FFAW, the unions across Atlantic Canada in particular. Change is difficult, but people really stepped up, and the information that we're getting from the logs is incredibly helpful as we move forward. It informs decision making, and I really thank people for participating. And I don't know if Associate Deputy, you have anything to add.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to step in here. I'm very interested in this answer as well. If you could submit that in writing to the committee so that we can have that on record. But with that, prochainement, on va aller.
Next, we'll go to Mr. Deschamps for 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to all colleagues. Good morning, Minister. Pleased to see you here with us today. Can you hear us? Can you hear me properly? Great. You stated in your opening statements that your main priority is to ensure the sustainability of fisheries. And I also, of course, believe that this is very important. Now, what we're hearing and what we have heard over the past few weeks at committee is a whole series of testimonies that really point to one reality, both from both sides of the country, and that's illegal fishing. It seems that fisheries officers, don't have all the means necessary to intervene. On Tuesday, we heard again from a witness that there's a directive that was sent to fisheries officers not to intervene when faced with illegal fishing and when it involves Indigenous peoples. And what I want to say right off the bat is that when we speak to Indigenous groups who take part in fishing, they are not for illegal fishing. And in band councils, for example, the people I have the opportunity to speak with, they are also concerned with preserving the resources, and they are not for illegal fishing at all. But there seems to be, for example, some alliances between those who don't believe that and organized crimes, for example. And we've heard that fisheries officers are being told not to get involved. Could you make the commitment right now to send a new directive out to say that fisheries officers have to intervene even when it involves Indigenous fishers?
So I'm going to be very clear again. Unauthorized fishing is unacceptable, period. And I have been very clear since I've come into this role, one that I am privileged to hold, that is a standard that we are working to achieve. Obviously, there are supports that we put in place, and to move in this direction, it takes time. I do want to thank the fisheries officers. I travel the country coast to coast to coast. I meet with fisheries officers in every region that I travel, and I thank them for the work. And I'm going to turn to my colleague, Mr. Lampertucci. I used to calling him Peter. My apologies. But I want to turn to you, sir, because I think it's really important that we clarify some of the misinformation. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done over these past few months. I think the work on the ground is very clear. So,
Madame la Ministre, je suis désolé parce que...
So, Minister, I'm sorry, but Mr. Lamborghini will be here longer than you will be, so I want to be able to ask you some questions directly. So what we're hearing is that there's some fisheries officers who are being told that they are not to intervene in certain cases, and now you're sending out the message that, if you want to send out the message that nobody is above the law, then I think you can have an impact. Are you ready to make that statement to say that fisheries officers must intervene against illegal fishing wherever it is?
I don't direct the work on the water with the fisheries officers. It's not appropriate for me to do that. I set a direction that we move in, and I work to ensure that from a departmental level, the supports are in place. We purchased a new vessel in Nova Scotia. We have moved forward in adding more officers, and the ongoing work of support. Certainly, Mr. Lampertucci, his role is an indication that we need to support the work of fisheries officers. That's my priority. It will continue to be my priority. The actual day-to-day work and when an officer can safely move forward and not, I leave that to the experts on the ground.
Mais ça, c'est tout à fait... on comprend, Madame la Ministre.
We understand that, Minister. But what we're hearing at committee is that there's been a directive issued by directors, and possibly it comes from above them, to say, you have to be careful when it involves certain members of society. You have the power to send out a message to fisheries officers and their directors to say, hey, we want you to intervene no matter who is involved in the illegal fishing. You can do that without getting involved in investigations on the day-to-day. Are you ready to announce to those working conservation and fisheries officers that they have to intervene when there's illegal fishing, whoever is involved?
I have been very clear Unauthorized fishing is unacceptable, period. That's the directive. The work on the ground, I leave that to the experts. I am not going to sit here and tell someone in a difficult situation what it is they need to do. That isn't safe, it isn't appropriate, but I've sent a clear directive.
Mardi, il y avait ici un ancien...
On Tuesday, we heard from a former fisheries officer and a former fisher. And so this person contacted the Band Council to see whether this person was authorized to conduct fishing and was told no. There are a lot of fisheries officers who see people fishing with boats. It's not just subsistence fishing. And fisheries officers did not step in. That's what we heard at committee. Do you tolerate that situation?
I will say the same thing again. Unauthorized fishing is unacceptable, period, full stop. I will not, and I do not operate in close contact to the work with fisheries officers, not appropriate. I need to be arm's length. I trust the teams on the ground. They know what needs to happen, and I certainly encourage further conversations and recommend that when the opportunity is appropriate, you speak directly to Mr. Lambertuzzi, and he's in the position to be able to speak to what happens on the water.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deschênes. That completes the first round.
Here with Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, and the officials for being here on the budget estimates. I noted in your opening remarks, and it'll probably be noticed on the West Coast, that there was little to no mention of West Coast fisheries in your opening remarks. Minister, Budget 2025 states that DFO is cutting research and monitoring activities, but you started canceling stock assessment activities for Pacific salmon well before Budget 2025 was announced. This is not good news for Pacific wild salmon because you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Why have you chosen to cut stock assessments for Pacific salmon?
I'm going to turn to the acting deputy to answer this, but I can tell you that the stock assessment of the BC salmon is incredibly important. So if you clarify that this is probably misinformation.
Thank you very much for the question through the chair. So the iconic importance of Pacific salmon cannot be understated, sir, and that is why we have the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. There's a variety of methods in place, including scientific, but also habitat restoration on the ground, stock assessments, both the modeling and in-season runs in real time to determine the flows.
The budget has cut the stock assessments. Minister, if you need to cut frivolous spending at DFO, then so be it. But stock assessments for Pacific salmon are essential. Yesterday, 35 signatories from across BC sent you a letter urging you to revitalize stock assessments of wild Pacific salmon that is essential for the health of wild salmon stocks and the prosperity of fisheries and communities that depend on them. Minister, will you listen to the voices of the academics, conservationists, resource users, and the people of British Columbia and prioritize Pacific salmon stock assessments?
I will reassure you that science is incredibly important from coast to coast to coast. It was actually the Harper government that cut science. We are not cutting science, and Deputy.
Stock assessments that you are cutting in the budget. If you won't listen to these organizations, large group of organizations, who will you listen to?
It's you.
Thank you, Minister. I haven't seen the letter in question, sir, about the specific points raised, but we maintain the stock assessment in the Pacific region for Pacific salmon.
Wow. On July 3rd, I wrote you to raise my concerns that DFO's failures to finalize contracts for stock assessments caused the cancellation of valuable sockeye stock assessments on the Fraser. On October 8th, 3 months later, you wrote back stating that Pacific salmon stock assessment projects were reassigned with implementation or more cost-efficient stock assessment methods. But the next day, your deputy minister told this committee that DFO did, in fact, fail to have stock assessment contracts signed on time. And she said, quote, "It had to do with the hiring process, but we did fix the problem," unquote. Minister, what was the true reason why salmon stock assessments in BC were cancelled this year?
So I can have just been confirmed. They were not canceled. There was no cut to the stock assessments.
There were stock assessments that were not done. We heard that from the people that were supposed to be doing the contracts were not signed
to the acting
in time.
To the acting deputy.
No, the questions are to you, Minister. Thank you. In 2025, this is regarding to the 2025 sockeye limitations. After 40 years of dedicated service to Pacific salmon fisheries management, Mike Griswold resigned from the Pacific Salmon Commission's Fraser panel in August because he could no longer support the Canadian government's mismanagement of Fraser River sockeye. Griswold stated his belief that the decision-making control of the panel is being taken away by less representative, inadequately equipped group, and that the directional control of this group has led directly to DFO neglecting one of its key mandates, and that is controlling and managing sockeye spawning escapements. Minister, you stated that you are responsible for managing Canada's fisheries resources. Why is Pacific salmon management so failed that trusted veteran experts are resigning in protest?
I can reassure you that we rely on science and the knowledge of harvesters, the information that happens or the work that happens in areas throughout BC to inform decisions. That is a priority. It will continue to be a priority. If you'd like to hear from the acting deputy, I'm happy to have her speak, but I can't speak and I won't speak to that specific instance, but I will tell you that we are committed to science-based decisions.
You are the minister. You should be able to speak to this.
So, sorry, I'm going to have to cut us off here. We are over time, but if there's any more information on this matter that can be submitted in writing, that would be appreciated. But next, we're going to go to Mr. Morrissey for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister. Minister, you've been listening to a number of questions in this committee, and you posed a question, a very important question, to the official opposition member, the Conservative member, on the issue of a seal call. And that question was failed to be answered because it's important that fishers understand he would not endorse a seal call because of the disastrous implications it would have on the marketplace in Europe and the U.S. that would devastate the East Coast fishery. So we have to approach it in a pragmatic way, in a practical way. Everybody knows that seal herd is growing too large, and measures got to be put in place. But rhetoric is easy on the wharf. Dealing with the reality of the intricacies of the fishery is important. So, Madam Minister, I respect your decision to manage this effectively and to protect our key markets in Europe and the U.S. on that particular point. The other point, Minister, that I would like for you to respond to is we've had a lot of questioning on demanding more and more from the department in a host of areas, protection, infrastructure, research. But every line in your key budget has been, the Conservative opposition voted against it. It voted against small craft harbors, it voted against protection, it voted against science, the Conservative opposition voted against every line item in the budget of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And it's important for fishers to understand who's got their back, who's standing with them. Would you give a quick opinion on that?
I will say, and thank you for the comments and the question, I will say that my role is to ensure that we have a sustainable fishery for future generations, and I take that very seriously. And to achieve that, we need to balance science, we need to balance the need for conservation, for sustainability, and we need to clearly understand the importance of the fishery, the coastal communities, rural communities, and Indigenous communities. And it is in that balanced space that we will move forward, but in no way would I compromise science. In no way would I remove the voice of harvesters, the people who are on the water, who know what they see every day, and that information and important knowledge needs to be incorporated into decision making. I'm committed to it.
Thank you, Minister. One of the areas that, as a parliamentarian, I'm most proud of our government is the investments our government has made in your department that you are now responsible for, especially in the area of protection. Could you give to this committee an overview of where we are at today, where we've come from over the last number of years, and really why in the past, we've seen limited enforcement in coastal communities as it relates to fishery, because quite frankly, we had a department that was almost gutted when it came to protection.
So, I believe in a measured approach, but at the same time, we can't be afraid to take decisions. There are core pillars that need to remain in place. Science is one. Engagement with stakeholders, engagement with those that are closest to this sector. We have to remain in conversation. We don't have to agree with each other, but we must remain in conversation. And we also need to understand that in order to preserve our this important sector for future generations, we have to ensure that we respect authorized fishing, and anything outside of that, there is consequence, and it will not be tolerated.
Expand on the measures taken in the protection section of the department, the personnel we now have, the boots that are now on the ground. And if you want to ask one of your officials to give us clear numbers, that would be fine.
Thank you. And then I'll turn to Mr. Lambertuzzi, and I really want to thank him for the work that he has done over the last number of months. We are seeing those results in real time, and I want to thank the officers. I know it's not always easy for them. To you, sir.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the question. So the investments in capacity are ongoing and constant. That starts with augmentation of boots on the ground by amplifying our impact on the ground. That's either through how we adjust our core priorities or surge resource those priorities. There's also a data investment plan going on, because data is at the base of how we enable those core capacities. And that is things like growing out our body-worn cameras, pilot program, the drones, as well as initiatives in terms of overall strategic assignment of where we focus on those capacities to the highest need.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrissey. Et prochainement, on va Monsieur.
Next, we have Mr. Deschênes for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Minister, I'd like to talk to you about the Quebec Fisheries Fund. We have brought together, actually it was quite easy, a common front in Gaspésie on November 22. The leader of the Bloc Québécois was with us. We had industrial fishers, 3 harvesters associations also. I also spoke with First Nations members who work in this sector. They are all asking for the Quebec Fisheries Fund to be renewed. That's one of the great one of the unfortunate points coming out of the budget. We want to improve the productivity of our fisheries, for example, scientific partnerships, innovation. Last time you encouraged me to write to the Minister of Finance to try to make changes, and I did so. But unfortunately, in the budget, we saw that there was no money set aside or allocated to this fund. And have you made any representations to ensure that the fund is renewed?
So the fund is still ongoing into 2026, but I will say with great respect, you voted against the many supports that were in the budget for your area, the runway, the shipyard, 22 small craft harbors.
Minister, of course, you may sometimes want to vote against because there's nothing for the Fisheries Fund, and you are for, aren't you?
The Fisheries Fund is still running till 2026, but I will also say, small craft harbor support is very significant. The Shark Pavilion, you spoke with me about, the funding was there for that. I'm here to work with, all members of the House, and I won't politicize the work. supports for the industry are incredibly important, and I continue to advocate for all of it. But, when the time comes, it is important that we get a budget across that has these supports in place.
Oui, mais dans ce budget-là, vous dites ce qu'on voit dans les...
But in the budget, well, what we're seeing is that there's $1 million that is left for the Quebec Fisheries Fund, and that's just to finish the work that was committed to until March 2026. But there's nothing afterwards. So what can we expect, and what are you doing to encourage the department to continue this fund?
I continue to always to advocate for supports for the industry, and I think it's actually an opportunity to have conversations around what worked incredibly well with the fisheries funds, regardless of where in the label in the country, what worked well, what it is that we have achieved, and we need to look at other objectives and emerging objectives. Our stresses are different than they were 2-3 years ago, so I think it's a real opportunity to evaluate. I have been having active conversations with my counterparts across provinces and territories. I'm having conversations with harvesters within industry, because I think it's an opportunity for us to look at what is it that we need as we go forward. So I don't see this as a loss. I just see it as a chance for us to pause and really do an evaluation.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Deschênes. Next, we're going
Thank you very much, Mr. Deschênes.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, last week, officials from your department admitted to this committee that your government's plan or crusade to meet these UN 30 by 30 targets of closing 30% of Canada's coastal waters to various economic activities is currently being undertaken and pursued without any socioeconomic analysis having been conducted whatsoever, before any study of how many jobs will be lost, how many fishermen will be put out of work, and how coastal communities across this country will be affected. Is that true?
I will tell you that the consultations are still active. It is a process, and I invite you to participate, and I invite people, harvesters in your area to participate. It is important that we have consultations, and so decisions are not made, but we need to continue to speak.
Okay, so no, because the closures are already being, and this has been going on for years. Do you believe that the government and DFO has done a good job so far of listening and accommodating fishermen?
So I can speak to DFO, and I can speak to my department, and I can speak to the work that I'm doing actively with DFO, and we consult. This isn't the work towards conservation areas involves other departments. It is a process. The process is intended to encourage engagement, and I absolutely support that. And I have been very clear at this table, and I've been very clear in every meeting that I've had since I've come into this role. We need to dialogue, and we need to understand each other, and we need to stay at those tables.
Do you have, like, it was mentioned in the throne speech, I believe, this 30 by 30 commitment. So it is clearly a key priority of your government. I don't think you would deny that. So is it true that you're pushing ahead with this 30 by 30 plan to close 30% of Canada's coastal waters to various economic activities, and you have no idea how many jobs that will cost fishermen and coastal communities, and how much economic activity that will cost our country at a time when we're obviously in very challenging economic conditions?
Conservation and sustainability are critical for all of us. It's part of being able to ensure we have a sector that's viable going forward.
So it's safe to say, Minister, that you will push ahead with this 30 by 30 regardless of the economic consequences and how many jobs will be lost? Is that fair?
I didn't say that. I said we can do multiple things at once, and I have great faith in our ability.
Okay, so you're willing to back away from the 30 by 30 commitment if the economic consequences are too severe? Is that fair? It's one or the other. It has to be one or the other, as you know.
I don't believe anything has to be one or the other. I think we can find balance, and I think there's tremendous amounts of misinformation connected with conservation areas. They are not intended to stop the use and fishing in the area. So I think, let's stay in dialogue. That's how we find a way forward.
Yes, there's a lot of ambiguity right now, but it's that ambiguity, uncertainty is obviously hurting fishermen and their families quite a bit. So I hope that you will try to push the department to provide clarity as quickly as possible. The other thing I really wanted to ask you about is for some time now your government has claimed, in contradiction to your own science, I might add, that you would terminate the open net salmon farming in British Columbia with some sort of vague transition. That supposed plan was supposed to arrive months ago. It never did. And now you have Liberal MPs, including on this committee, contradicting each other in public about whether that plan is actually, you intend to follow through on those closures of open net salmon farming in BC. Thousands of British Columbians, as I'm sure you can appreciate, especially in my riding, rely on this industry for work, rely on it for income, to meet mortgage payments, to put food on the table, to feed their families. I honestly don't mean to be political. I just want to know what their government is planning to do. Do you have a plan? And what do you want me to tell these constituents who are working in this industry right now about what their future holds?
I don't have an update at this moment, but actively engaged, and I have also been actively engaged in dialogue with the sector in British Columbia. I understand the want for clarity, and I will inform in due course.
Do you have a timeline?
I understand that the timelines are sensitive, and I will get back to you when I have a decision.
So there's still no timeline now? Like I'm going to be meeting with a First Nations chief later today whose entire community completely depends on this industry up in Port Hardy. And it's very confusing. Do you have, is this government still planning to pursue a policy of two different policies for two separate coasts? And if so, is there something special in the waters off the Pacific that why you have to ban aquaculture on the Pacific coast but not the Atlantic?
I will say to you that I was in Port Harding this summer and met with Indigenous groups. I'm very sensitive to the challenges, and I'm sensitive to the need for clarity. I am not able to provide that at this moment, but I am actively working on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. And next, we're going to go to Mr. D'Entremont for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank the Minister and staff for being here today. I wanted to sort of pick up maybe where Mr. Deschênes was, Mr. Morrissey was earlier, talking about rules, trying to set a real direction in the rules that we're supposed to be following, that set of seasons that we're doing. So maybe just talk about, I want to, if the Minister can, maybe with a little support, talk about the enforcement position, especially when it comes to Districts 33 and 34 right now, through the whole season, not just the commercial, but the summer season that we've been experiencing over the last number of months.
So I'm going to turn over for more specifics because I obviously stay arm's length from what happens on the water, but I will say that the need for clarity in terms of the unauthorized fishing is unacceptable. Starting at that point, how it is that we move forward. It's often education as well, but I'll turn to Mr. Lambertucci to speak to that. But harvesters have the right to feel safe when they're on the water. And certainly I take the responsibility of giving the directive that we need to move forward to help ensure that happens. And sir, if you'd like to add detail on what's happening in the region.
Thank you, Minister, and thanks for the question, Chair. Thank you for the question, Chair, and thank you, Minister. So the seasonal enforcement is the same from season to season. Unauthorized is unauthorized. And we take a very progressive approach to that as we are enforcing. We do have, and we often do, perform education throughout the continuum of enforcement activities. But if it's unauthorized, we do move to an enforcement position. We have a right to protect the rights-based fisheries, and we do so. They have to have an orderly and safe season, as do all commercial harvesters. And that is the very basis of our approach. When we take the enforcement continuum approach, it's evidence-based, it's based on ground truth, and we move forward based on that being intelligence-supported as we approach these enforcement initiatives. So whether it's a rights-based approach or a commercial harvest approach, unauthorized is unauthorized, and we follow that every season, regardless of open or out-of-season fishing.
So District 33 and 34 are fishing right now. I don't know about the weather today, but they got started last week. I'm already hearing challenges within that fishery, some low catches, but their biggest challenge at this point is prices. They're being affected by a number of issues. Low catches is one, but the Chinese tariffs are really putting a damper on things. They're sort of coming in around $8 a pound. So I'm just wondering on the total data catch here, like how is the fishery doing, and how is the department going to be responding to understand what the whole package looks like? What does lobster in Southwest Nova Scotia actually look like, and what is that future?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So in terms of tariffs, I can certainly say that we continue to work, certainly with Chinese officials, to try to work beyond the tariffs that are having a very real challenge across the country for harvesters. The same thing, we know the U.S. market is very challenging as well. So that is something that we continue to work on. We have to look at climate change and what water temperatures, what the impact that's having on lobsters. We need to be guided by science, and at no time can we not be very mindful of what we are seeing from science, what we're hearing from harvesters. They are on the water, and they know what a day's catch looks like. And it really speaks to the need for measured approaches. This is an important industry. It is a livelihood, and so we have to balance that very real reality for families and harvesters with sustainability. I don't know, Acting Deputy, if you have anything you'd like to add to that, but I can certainly reassure in all of the conversations, I will always add the need to ensure that the economic realities are held and become part of the principles as we make changes going forward.
If you could just very briefly, because we have 5 seconds left here, and then maybe an answer by writing would be better.
Happy to provide some statistics about the value of the lobster sector and the work that we're doing at the highest level, the catches themselves and the increases that we've seen. But we're also watching closely the health of the overall stock, sir. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, and that completes our second round. We're going to do an abridged third round here. We'll do 3.5 minutes for the Conservatives and the Liberals, and then 2 minutes for Pour le Bloc. And so next we'll have Mr. Dawson. You have the floor for 3.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, is there a priority list with the small craft harbours that need the most repairs? Does the government follow that list with the harbours that are in the most need of repairs first, or are they picked in political fashion?
Thank you for the question. I smile because, again, you voted against this. Small craft harbors are critical to this industry. They are the backbone of the industry, and they are so important to rural, coastal, Indigenous communities. So what I will say to you...
I got 3.5 minutes.
Okay.
I don't need no filibustering. I'm going to get to the point. Is there a list, yes or no?
It is not a political process.
Okay.
Yes, there is a list.
Can you provide the list?
It is engagement with harvesters at the wharf, and I can tell you from my own riding, the users of the wharf are actively engaged with the experts and the teams on the ground. Okay. This really happens at regional levels. I only become involved for the final decision.
The reason I'm asking is when we look at the expenditures for 24-25, which was $29 million for the whole budget, 13 projects were announced in my neighbouring ridings, Beausejour and Acadie Bathurst. Meanwhile, in 21, 9 projects were made for Beausejour, none for Miramichi Grand Lake and none for Acadie Bathurst. So that's 100% of the projects in 21 and 60% in 24 in the riding of a senior cabinet minister, Liberal cabinet minister. It is reasonable to say that these announcements were made based on politics.
Decisions are made at community level, and they are made based on a series of criteria, and I don't know, Acting Deputy,
I'm not
if you'd
asking
like
the
to speak
Deputy
to the
Minister,
process.
I'm asking you.
I don't make political decisions.
Well, we found these numbers in the budget.
I don't make political decisions.
So can you give me a list?
I don't make political decisions.
Can you give me a list of how they were prioritized?
I will certainly be pleased that we pass on, we can provide the operational plan for small craft harbors and how that whole engagement happens. Pleased to do it.
Okay. How much money in this year's budget was allocated to repairs for small craft harbors that were devastated by Hurricane Fiona? Something that supposedly should have been done years ago.
I know it's ongoing work, so I know that from my own province. I'm happy to provide that number for you. We will follow up in writing.
Okay. How much time? Can the minister give the committee an update on the creation of the Arctic Fisheries Fund and the Atlantic Quebec Fisheries Funds, considering that your party promised to, and I quote, help our fisheries respond to tariffs, reduce the risk involved in expanding to new markets through these funds?
So there's multiple supports available, certainly for new markets, and I can provide for your region the exact amount and how to access it. And in terms of the fishery funds, I encourage you to have a conversation with my team on, in your area, what worked incredibly well, what you'd like to see going forward, and please know that those funds continue into 2026, the current funds.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dawson. And next, we're going to go to Mr. Cormier for 3.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. Just to give a little bit of history for my colleague who just asked a bunch of questions about, or a few questions about small craft harbors. In the writing my colleague is talking about, his previous colleague was was never there, was completely absent from that region for the whole time. And then we met with, some people met with Pierre Poilievre, who said, of course, they would support projects there, but then vote against the budget. When we go to the different ridings, we need to be there with data, with numbers, so that we can, the interpreter knows that a number of people are talking at the same time. I know, Madam Minister, that small craft harbors are incredibly important. Since the harbor era, I think we've invested over $1 billion in small craft harbors. We needed that investment because for 10 years before that, there had been complete neglect of these harbors. Now, nearly $56 million since 2017 was allocated to my riding, and in Monsieur Deschaines' riding also, my colleague's riding. I understand that many investments have been made. It's a priority. It's also a priority for the Atlantic Caucus, and I'm sure that we'll have access to more funding over time. Now, one of the great concerns in my riding, and I've been talking about it for years, is the following. Snow crab permits that are sold away from my region, whether it's to Quebec, to Nova Scotia, or Prince Edward Island. Those permits are leaving our region because of regulations that need to be adjusted. For example, criteria for period of living in the province, for example, 6 months only. There are other regulations under the Fisheries Act because there are permits that cost $10, $50 million that they're impossible to purchase. So can you request that the sale of these permits be paused so that a study can be done to see what can be done in our communities?
Thank you for the question. It's very important, and I certainly appreciate the time that I spent in your riding this summer and heard this loud and clear. And I think it really speaks to the need for us to continue to dialogue. You and I continue to speak about this. I know it's important, and I want to just reference the need to ensure that we have not only the conservation measures in place that ensure a sustainable fishery into the future. It's also very important that we have the young harvesters who really need to come on board immediately to ensure that we have the harvesters on the water in these communities as we go forward. So I think we need to have very specific conversations about all the things that we need to do to ensure that our coastal, our rural, and our Indigenous communities are still connected to the fisheries in a very tangible way, because it's the economic benefit for the larger region, apart from the direct funds to the harvester. So I'm absolutely open to continuing this conversation with you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Cormier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cormier. And we'll end with Mr. Deschaines for 2 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, thank you for the answers you gave to my colleague, Mr. D'Entremont, because I thought they were quite substantial. You said we need more clarity on unauthorized fishing and that harvesters have the right to be safe on the waters. So you're recognizing that there's a problem we need to fix.
I recognize that we have a challenge, and I've been very clear that we need to move forward to, yes, ensure that we have authorized fishing, and second to that in all ways we have to ensure safety for harvesters, of course.
Et comment allez-vous vous y prendre?
And what will you do to change things?
I will continue to do what I'm doing, working with my colleague, Mr. Lambertucci, in the work to support what happens on the water with fisheries officers, but I think we also have a role to play in education. We have, all of us, a role to play in leadership to provide information to harvesters on what is expected, the rules, the regulations, and I think, and I certainly want to thank fisheries officers. They have stepped up in a very real way. And I think, we've made tremendous strides in a short period of time, and that's never easy. And I want to thank them for that work.
Et tantôt, vous avez dit, ils doivent intervenir.
So you've said that they must intervene whether there are ancestral rights or not that are in question, correct?
I don't direct what happens on the water. You'll have to speak, and I'm happy to turn it over to Mr. Lambertucci for that question, but I don't direct what happens on the water.
Okay.
If we just very, very briefly, because we're at time, it might be better to deliver that in writing, if possible. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deschênes.
That completes our first panel. I do want to thank the Minister for taking the time to be with us today and to speak to the estimates and otherwise, as well as the departmental officials. We are going to suspend for a few minutes to allow the Minister to depart, and then we'll continue with questions with the officials for the remainder of the time. I do want to welcome some new witnesses to the table as well, including Niall O'Day, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister to Strategic Policy, Adam Burns, Assistant Deputy Minister, Fisheries and Harbour Management, and Jennifer Sachs, Assistant Deputy Minister, Aquatic Ecosystems. Before we continue, I just want to inform members that we are going to dismiss officials around 10:10 so we can take care of voting on the supplementary estimates. But with that, we're going to jump into the first round of questions for the second panel, starting with Mr. Small for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Ms. Levesque, Mr. Chair, after my bill to manage pinnipeds and balanced ecosystems was tabled in 2022, this Liberal government was all over developing markets and expanding harvests. A healthy harvest of harps would be north of 300,000 for sure. In 2023, it was 40,000. 2024, it was 32,000. And in this year, it was somewhere around 25,000. So during, in the last 3 years after the commitment was made to bring down seal numbers by having a healthy harvest, it's been just failure upon failure. And we just heard the minister say that she believes in having a healthy seal harvest. Do you know why the Prime Minister removed seal products, the trade of seal products, from the agenda in June when the meeting was had with Europeans for a trade summit?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I don't know the specific circumstances under which the agendas are set at the leader-to-leader level in that regard. But we have engaged and continue to engage with the European Union at officials at the highest level to explore repealing the ban on trade in seals, including a ministerial letter submitted in August 2024. And we do continue to manage several seal harvests, as you note, but the harvest is lower than the allowable rates. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. To Ms. Sachs. Ms. Sachs, I've had a number of salmon anglers throughout Atlantic Canada approach me over the last few weeks, and since the budget came out, with the 15% planned, 15% reduction planned in DFO's budget. Is the River Guardian program in Atlantic Canada in danger of being cut? Yes or no?
On that, at this point, we continue to support Atlantic. Atlantic salmon is absolutely a priority for us to continue.
There's talks of cuts in programs and the science and whatnot. Are there plans to reduce the River Guardian program, which is already way too small? Are there plans to reduce it?
I'm not aware of plans at this point in time. I would have to follow up with information on that.
Thank you. To Mr. Lambertucci, Mr. Chair, you know, we have a number of witnesses. I'm expecting some witnesses next week from CNP and from the department's investigating team and whatnot. I'm going to read a quote from Mr. Lambertucci from this last meeting. He said, as I stated earlier, if the committee is inviting fisheries officers to present for various in-camera sessions, that testimony would be welcome. Why in camera, Mr. Lambertucci?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The in-camera aspect is as much to protect the officer as it is to protect potential sensitivities for the department. There are a number of things we do and a number of processes we have that aren't best suited for public forum.
Thank you. Thank you. Who to protect the officer from who?
So the officers follow. There's a duty of loyalty that they pursue. They exercise their judgment every day, and I have full trust in their judgment. But in the
Is it to protect them from themselves?
I think that's probably an overstatement. There are things that happen in the course of a committee and conversation that flows from committee.
Do you trust them? Do you trust them to not expose aspects of ongoing investigations? Do you have faith in them that they could do the right thing in that respect?
I've had the privilege of traveling this country and meeting with my officers, and I have trust and confidence in my officers.
So why would you not trust them to speak in public?
It's not a question of trust, Mr. Small. It is a question of just preserving some of the sensitivities that may be discussed at this committee.
So you're going to stick with forcing witnesses in the future that are in your employ to witness in camera only. And for those who are watching out there, in camera means that the testimony is confidential inside these four walls. So I've had it come to my attention that a lot of people who'd like to testify to expose what's going on inside DFO are uncomfortable about testifying in camera because they feel that the best protection is from the public knowing what they've actually said, and that if retributions come their way, that there's sunlight on it. It's transparent, and you mentioned transparency in your last meeting here. Do you believe in transparency?
I'm afraid we're well past time here. It's an important question. If the witness could provide that answer in writing, it would be much appreciated. But next, we're going to go to Mr. Cormier for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listen, over the past few weeks, we've heard much testimony, whether it's from fisheries officers, harvesters, or even people from the legal services who've come and stated that with some groups, there were directives that not to intervene when certain groups are involved. For example, Indigenous groups, we've named them in the past. So, first question, the orders they said they received, do you know if those orders, for example, did they come from the Department of Indigenous Services? Anybody?
No? Oui, no?
No. Do you know if there are directives or orders that were issued by the Department of Justice, for example, not to intervene with those groups? The conservation and protection operations are independent, are based on what's happening on the ground and on the judgment of fisheries officers. Do you know if there, question, do you know if there were any orders given by the previous Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, and Katie Telford, his assistant advisor, not to? Any judgments are made based on what's happening on the water. Did the minister or deputy minister's office issue any orders not to intervene when those groups are intervened? No. The orders are to prevent illegal fishing and unauthorized fishing. You understand that for the trust of the public and also in terms of our objectives for reconciliation, it's important for people to trust the justice system, to know that any infractions will be punished. So if there have been no orders issued to not intervene, why do all the witnesses before committee say the opposite? That's an excellent question. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. We also looked at the testimony, the investigations, and all the programs and so on, and we heard the same things. The discussions that happened between individuals years ago, well, I don't want to I don't want to mislead the committee and say that I know exactly what's happening in all those discussions, but there's a toolbox that officers have, from education to referring cases to the prosecution services. But the work of the officers is not always visible, if you can call it that. So, Mr. Lambertucci, I hope I said that correctly.
Officers are doing a tremendous job on the ground. Like I know a lot of them in my area. But let's get the two sides of the medal here, both sides of the medal. Like, yes, we saw a thing. We saw a report on the news lately by two report on Fifth Estate and Radio-Canada that were some, illegal fisheries going on, right? And this is not only on First Nation. We all know that in commercial fisheries also, some things like that happen, like illegal landing, for example, catches that are not reported. So if I understand you right at the beginning, or maybe it was a minister, there's a lot more arrests that was done in the past, like, couple of months, if I get that right? Can you just, tell us, like, what kind of, arrest was done? And was it, like, First Nation only? Was it, like, commercial fishers also? Can you just, like, give us a couple of examples of some arrests that was made?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's been an active last several months, both during the off-season and the commercial season. There have been a number of arrests and interceptions of unauthorized sale, both in the Gulf region and in the Maritimes. I believe we have 5 active investigations that have gone forward for charge approval with Public Prosecutions Canada. And through the open commercial harvest season that is taking place right now in some of the LFAs, there's been a number of inspections and enforcement activities around non-licensed personnel that are fishing, poorly tagged traps or untagged traps. So it does occur in both fisheries, and it is active.
Parfait, merci. Madame Lévesque, je vais aller à vous à nouveau. Première.
Thank you, Ms. Lévesque. I'll go to you. First of all, thank you. Welcome, rather, in your new position, and congratulations. Now, I asked the question of the minister earlier, and it's been about 6 years that I've been fighting for this. It's the sale of permits, especially for snow crab. There are rules that need to be changed in a very simple way. There are permits leaving our region, and I understand that since it's in Area 12, there are certain things, certain conditions, but the whole point is to keep permits within the community. That's not what's happening. There are 3 permits that are being considered for sale right now, and what I want is that there's a moratorium so that we can figure out how to stop these sales. So 1 permit can cover about 5 people, so there are many people being impacted. Can you do anything to change this situation? I'm sorry we're over time, so if you could provide an answer in writing, that would be great. Yes, thank you. And next we'll go to Mr. Deschênes for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lambertucci, I have questions for you to be able to understand your vision or how you see things clearly on illegal fishing. Based on what you said, if I understood correctly, your fisheries officers must intervene and anytime there are reports of unauthorized fishing?
Yes, that is correct. So unauthorized is unauthorized in our enforcement approach. There is an enforcement continuum in which we deal with that enforcement approach. And along that continuum, that is where the fishery officers enjoy judgment and implement that judgment of whether they do educate, ticket, fine, or pursue larger investigative pathways where it could lead to recommendations for charges with PPSC.
Vous parlez souvent de ce continuum et je comprends.
You often mention continuums, and I understand that. There's raising awareness. Last time you appeared before the committee, I asked you questions regarding the fact that some officers provide promotional material, and you said you would look into that to see what was happening. And have you been able to do that? Is that recommended to fisheries officers when there is unlawful fishing?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. I have had that opportunity to follow up that question, and I have gone coast to coast in all our regions asking that information. There are, in fact, promotional materials that fishery officers do have available to them, and that is part of our pillar of education. And if you look at our three-pillar, it's an education continuum leading to an enforcement continuum with monitoring and investigation as the middle pillar of that continuum. The educational products that are provided coast to coast from fishery officers are for that educational continuum. And it's for all persons in all locations, on the water, off the water. And it's really just a way for us to enhance situational awareness and education about numbers to call, rights to fish, requirements around licensing. There's a whole assortment of educational products we have.
Mais moi, les outils promotionnels dont j'ai...
So the promotional tools I was able to see is hats and also waterproof bags that had Indigenous writing on it, for example. So we were told that when there's an Indigenous fisher who's not authorized by their band council, first you provide promotional materials. So you're confirming that that's the case?
So from the education piece of our pillar, the reason why there are writings in traditional languages is part of our reconciliations to respect those rights. If there was a straightforward, unauthorized activity, and it was a recidivist type of activity, there would be an enforcement continuum. But on first contact, as we are educating with the communities, we do sometimes provide those education materials. There are no education materials provided if it's investigative or part of an arrest towards a prosecution.
Donc, si un agent des pêches...
So if a fisheries officer is faced with a member of a First Nation who is conducting subsistence fishing but caught a female with eggs and it's a first offense, instead of some kind of fine, they'll get a bag or a hat. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't phrase it in that perspective. A female with eggs could be seen as a little bit more of an egregious offense if you are illegal fishing out of season for that product. That lobster would definitely be returned to the water, and there would be discussion on how we would pursue that. That may not just lead from an educational product.
Okay. Mais les outils promotionnels, les casquettes et les...
But promotional tools, for example, the bags and the hats, what kind of circumstances would that be appropriate when there's violation of the law?
So the promotional products could, like as I said earlier, could be on land, on water, in schools, at community centers as part of our pre-season education plan.
Ça va pour des fins...
That's fine for educational purposes. But the information I've gotten, tell me if I'm wrong, the fisheries officers have those tools, and it's part of the continuum. So they are confronted with situations where there's unauthorized fishing, and instead of issuing a fine or taking action, they'll provide promotional materials.
There could be instances if it's a new entrant to the fishery or someone we are unfamiliar with, or someone who is not fishing with intent to commit illegality. That is part of the judgment that the officers have an opportunity to apply. There is the reconciliation piece in terms of how we exercise that judgment, both in First Nation and non-First Nation types of fisheries.
Justement là-dessus, donc...
About that, are there also promotional tools that are provided to non-Indigenous people who are intercepted by fisheries officers when they're in breach of the law?
There are promotional items provided to both Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. And if there is those, and I want to just use unauthorized as unauthorized, and there are various spectrums of that as well. So at times, during the education phase, with new entrants or new participants in the fisheries, accidents can happen. And if they are non-malicious, and if there is no mens rea or intent behind it to be malicious, this is where the intent of the officer and the judgment of the officer comes into existence.
Parce que moi,
Pardon.
Oh, apologies. I must interrupt. It's the end of our time, and that completes the first round. We will start our second round.
Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses from the department for being here. There's some corporate history in the room here, and then there's some new members. Mr. Morrissey from the other side, him and I have been on this committee for next month. It will be 10 years. But we've seen 7 different ministers, changes of staff, constantly revolving, including changes of mandates from the prime ministers and changing of directives. Who in the department is responsible for briefings to the minister regarding budget allocations and producing the estimates?
Thank you for the question. In the department, the chief financial officer is responsible for the ultimate preparation of the financial statements, the materials, et cetera, but other assistant deputy ministers also do prepare recommendations or advice, say, for example, in the development of a new program or approach, what the parameters might look like, or in the case of science, for expenditures in that space, but always working with the chief financial officer to bring those attested proposals forward to the minister for consideration.
And it's all brought up to the minister to make the final decision, is that correct?
Indeed, there are, once budgetary levels are set, then we have, as public servants, rules to follow in terms of the expenditures against those broad priorities, but absolutely yes. And then we are governed by the policy cover as established by Cabinet and the terms and conditions of programs as set out by the Treasury Board.
And in your role as acting deputy minister, where does your role fit into that, or your predecessor's role fit into that?
Indeed, thank you for the question. So, is responsible as the ultimate financial officer for the department. So there's the chief financial officer and then the chief accounting officer role that is occupied by the deputy minister of every department. That's not unique to DFO, but also in terms of working to make sure that the department's proposals are aligned and advising the minister. So signing off on a policy note, for example, or a memorandum going across.
Okay, so how long have you been in this role?
My predecessor retired 2 weeks ago, and I'm here in an interim capacity, but have been the Associate Deputy Minister at Fisheries and Oceans since October 21st, 2024.
Okay, so you've got some history there.
Indeed.
Okay, thank you. That'll lead to this question. We never get enough time to ask the minister, so I have to ask you now. DFO has already allocated over $901 million for grants and contributions in this fiscal, and the Estimates B seeks another $140 million for grants and contributions for a total of just over $1 billion. Do you have specific details on why this increase was necessary?
Indeed, thank you for the question, sir. Those specific increases in grants and contributions are to advance the negotiation and implementation of fisheries reconciliation agreements in British Columbia. They're all under negotiation at this point, so I can't speak to specific nations, but they are for the advancement therein.
So has your office already identified the recipients of the proposed grants and contributions?
So the grants and contribution funding is provided once the process to establish a fisheries reconciliation agreement, which is done through cabinet authorities, not exclusively. It's not a deputy minister level authority or ministerial one.
So those haven't been assigned or allocated at this point?
We receive authorities before we engage in those types of discussions to not commit the Crown to any negotiations to which we are not party, but ultimately before finalization of any agreements, we do have to confirm those, and that's where these grants and contributions would advance.
Okay, so can you describe how the $141 million that's proposed in the Estimates B was determined?
It's indeed, thank you very much for the question. It is determined through the existing negotiation tables that are under place with each of these fisheries reconciliation agreements for a variety of eligible activities under the reconciliation agreements framework, and then will be formed into publicly disclosed fisheries reconciliation agreements as with others.
Okay, thank you. Let's switch topics now. For the past decade, I've pressed this government and the Liberal government and every one of the minister's predecessors to recognize the threats of aquatic invasive species in British Columbia. Specifically, I've pleaded for BC just to get an allocated fair share of the federal resources for fighting AIS in Canada. On November 27th, the Okanagan Basin Water Board sent a letter expressing growing concern over critical infrastructure costs. And when will this department finally fulfill the mandate and commitment to biodiversity that is required and the risks that aquatic invasive species pose in British Columbia?
So, I hate to jump in again, but we are over time. It's an important question. If you could, Deputy Minister, respond in writing to that, that would be much appreciated.
Sir.
But next we're going to go to Mr. Clausen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to all our witnesses here for attending. I was very happy to hear the minister say that any unauthorized fishing is illegal and that we fully support enforcement. Mr. Lambertucci, just a question. We hear so much about illegal fishing on the East Coast, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about enforcement of recreational fisheries. Given that we saw quite an incident in British Columbia this year with the salmon fishing in Chilliwack along the Fraser River, how does the enforcement happen with recreational fishers?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I will say I've had the privilege of joining my officers on the West Coast for some of that enforcement. And the same stands. Illegal is illegal, unauthorized is unauthorized. We do that through a very graduated approach that's intelligence supported in terms of how we deploy to the core problematic areas. We surge our resources to those problematic areas. There are a number of enforcement tools that we utilize on the Pacific side. Helicopters, boats, vehicles, often all working in tandem one with the other. Through that enforcement continuum, it is the same on the East Coast that it is on the West Coast. We have stakeholder engagement, we have education, we have ticketing, we have fines, and then we have investigations, particularly as they concern the more egregious matters that we submit to PPSC for charge approval to move to the court process.
Thank you very much. And we have a large amount of First Nations groups up and down the Fraser River. Just what would be their relationship with enforcement with the Indigenous communities on the West Coast?
So we do have Indigenous engagement teams on both coasts, east and west, and in the Arctic regions. Those Indigenous engagement teams work on various policies, building trust in the community. They work both on, and with the communities. If I could use Haida Gwaii as a great example of what that kind of collaboration looks like, we have guardians and fishery officers embedded in Haida Gwaii working on respective elements that both protect Indigenous rights, but allow us also to enforce whatever could be unauthorized, both recreational and commercial in those areas. Very successful program.
Thank you very much. Ms. Levesque, the Fraser panel that was talked about before, and I know that there was one member who resigned from that panel. I've met with a number of First Nations groups, and I believe that the panel works on a consensus module. And I'm just wondering if you could give us a bit of a background on how exactly that consensus model is working and how it actually functions and how it is working or not working.
Thank you very much for the question. The panel is a very important binational mechanism that recognizes the consensus-based approach to both trying to understand the flows, predicting the runs as they arrive in both pre-season and in season, but also around the management measures therein. The panel has senior representation. We have 2 commissioners that are from DFO, but it is a mix of experts from outside as well as our 2 representatives. And it is a crucial forum for the discussion and management of these, but it is on a consensus basis. And we could not advance this work without the incredible contributions of those that give their time to this commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The salmon has been a point of controversy on the West Coast, obviously, and we also have to deal with conservation issues, and a lot of it, or a large amount of what we hear is around the southern resident killer whales. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the impact of the harvest of the salmon fisheries and what is being done to protect the southern resident killer whales.
So I'm afraid I've got to jump in again because we're at time. So, Deputy Minister, if you could just provide that answer in writing, it'd be much appreciated.
I would love to. Thank you.
Et prochainement, on va Monsieur
Next, Mr. Deschênes for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to continue with my questions for Mr. Lambertucci. I was pleased to hear what you had to say. That is, unauthorized fishing is unauthorized fishing. We need to make sure the law is enforced across the board to protect the resources. Now, there were questions regarding where the directives could come from, or the opposite, because what we've heard is fisheries officers being told don't intervene in certain situations. I want to hear what you'll do to ensure that your approach will get to the fisheries officers. Again, on Tuesday, we heard that fisher who contacted officials, or authorities rather, because there was unauthorized fishing, but then there was nothing done. So how are you going to make sure that things get to the ground?
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. There's a few items in your question, and I'll try to deal with them one at a time. So the first issue is, of course, there was, in my research from our last appearance, there was no direction that fishery officers are not to enforce the law. That directive was never located, and it does not exist. In my time since assuming the chair, I have traveled across the country and done a number of town halls with our fishery officers to try and remedy any misinformation and to provide extra clarity and accountabilities about roles and responsibilities. And that is that the mandate of a fishery officer and my strategic direction is unauthorized is unauthorized. I very much respect the enforcement continuum we implement. It's essential that we do the education piece properly, and it's essential that we consult with our communities and our stakeholders as we do that job. Moving forward and looking forward, we have a strategic plan where we are intelligence supported to focus on our highest priority and core areas. We have plans for unauthorized fishing seasons, authorized fishing seasons. We do our patrols on land, sea, and air, so it is a multiplicity of approaches. And then there is enabling elements that we work with our partners, both provincially, federally, municipally, as we take our enforcement approach for the unauthorized and the authorized activities.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Deschênes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deschênes.
Gun for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Deschênes and Mr. Cormier for some of their thoughtful questions over the last couple meetings. To Mr. Lambertucci, which department or government decides which areas in Canada are open for fishing?
Our department.
It's interesting that you say that, because I have heard repeated stories from fishermen of Indigenous bands unilaterally declaring an area closed, and then when the fishermen go to these areas, even though DFO says they're open, they are intimidated, their traps are cut in some cases, and they are chased out of these areas. DFO is informed, nothing is done. Why is nothing being done?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. And similar to Mr. Deschênes, the same answer applies to both your questions about law enforcement capacity on the water. We govern and oversee approximately 400,000 plus kilometers of shoreline. Within our capacities, we allocate to the highest priorities. We do see a high number of calls for service, and we have peak seasons and off seasons.
So, I appreciate that answer. With all due respect, are you saying that the federal government of a G7 country is not able to enforce the law and a consistent application of the law along BC's coast. I mean, I'm talking about some of these Indigenous bands have less than 100 people. I mean, we're a G7 country. To me, it's quite obvious that a political decision is made not to enforce the law in these areas.
So the actual opening and closings and the legislation are not CNPs to generate. I would turn to my colleagues to speak to how the opening and closing of the seasons happen. We enforce those openings and closings and the conditions of license. In terms of not being able to enforce, we take all calls for service. They are all triaged, and we deploy with the capacity we have to the highest priorities at the time those calls are received.
I mean, I find this, quite frankly, impossible to believe that this is not. I mean, maybe some of the other officials there can respond to these unilateral declarations by Indigenous groups, but clearly DFO is making a decision not to enforce the law, even though these areas remain open to fishing notionally for DFO. I mean, do we need the Coast Guard? Do you need the Navy's help to enforce these areas on the Kinkum Inlet, Kitasoo Bay? Like, you can't enforce these areas with the billion-dollar budget that you have.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I wouldn't characterize it in the statement that you're making. We do enforce, and we are as present as our capacity allows based on the priorities of those responses.
So the other thing that I want to point out is I talked to a recently retired fisheries officer who explained this to me in some detail, and they're going to be testifying next week, that what is happening, and I've seen this happen with police in this country as well, is that, and I want you to be blunt, I want you to be very specific and not to run cover for anybody, is I was told very explicitly that the Department of Justice would not approve charges against illegal fishing or illegal trafficking of fish, fishing out of season, whatever, for Indigenous individuals if they didn't have the First Nations band approval. Is that true?
I cannot speak. Thank you for the question. I can't speak for the Department of Justice and their decision-making.
Well, you're traveling the country talking to your DFO officials, and you seem like a very genuine person. So I'm guessing this would have made its way back to you if that was the case. Because I know for police in this country, like fishery officers, is they will stop enforcing the law if they know all of their work and paperwork is going to come to nothing because charges aren't going to be approved. So is that happening?
Thank you for the question. CNP enforces based on the rules, regulations, and laws that we have to enforce behind. Who decides to charge and what that assessment process looks like, as we've heard from prior testimony at this committee, rests with
Are you telling me, can you appreciate the fact that if your fishery officers know if they go and enforce the letter of the law, charges won't be approved by justice, then they aren't going to bother enforcing the law? Can you see how that would happen?
Again, I wouldn't characterize it in that way. Fishery officers exercise their judgment, and they will move forward with investigations through the enforcement continuum.
But they're not. But they're not. That's what I'm telling you. I've traveled the ride. I have tons of supporters in the recreational commercial fishing industry, and they're telling me and they're giving me firsthand accounts that the law is not being enforced. And that's what I'm telling you, and that's what I was elected here to do. And there's other members of all parties saying the exact same thing. And so I hope that you take that feedback and report back accordingly. But my understanding is that it's not the fisheries officers, it's the Department of Justice. And I would encourage you to throw the Department of Justice under the bus if that is in fact the case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. That completes the time. Next, we're going to go to Mr. Connors for 5 minutes.
Thank you for coming out. I want to go back to something that I was asking the minister about, is leveraging the artificial intelligence and the digital tools. We all know that the larger offshore vessels have sophisticated technology and can track quotas or fish in the bays. Our smaller fishermen, our fishers, don't have that technology, and a number of them, especially some lobster fishermen and some other boats, say that the e-logs are causing them concern. How much further are we going to go, like with the e-logs, and what's the importance of getting the data on the water as opposed to a fisher coming in and inputting it into a computer afterwards?
Thank you very much for the question, sir. So with regards to e-logs, the timely provision of data in real time helps us not only from an enforcement perspective, getting intelligence, scientific perspective, data collecting, that partnership is integral, but also helps for export market development and catch certification, whether through the MSC certification process or other certification processes that our industries are seeking to achieve to maximize export value of the high quality products and to demonstrate the practices in place. With regards to your specific question about artificial intelligence, this is an intent from the departmental perspective to look at how we can do streamlining our own operations with the introduction of AI, looking at how we can, reprioritize putting people into higher risk areas of work, action, and streamlining. For example, we have a highly paper-based process in enforcement where the officers write the reports handwritten in their vehicles. Can we look at the ability to use a technological solution to advance that? Can we look at how we use we collect a ton of data, whether through science or through industry, as I noted, in real time, and how do we aggregate that data to do modeling work, predictive work, and make sure that we're getting the best possible results. It's also about some of our own internal, like the back office of DFO and how we streamline in those spaces as well. Thank you very much for the follow-up.
Would this, from an enforcement perspective, will this speed up the enforcement processing perspective? How will it impact the enforcement perspective?
Thank you very much for the question, Chair. So we're very excited about the introduction of our digital modernization strategy, and we see tremendous efficiencies coming out of that digital modernization. The AI tools that can help us with any number of areas of enforcement where that are largely human-led right now can be absolutely advanced, saving officers time in terms of level of effort, and increasing our time for boots on the ground and boats in the water. And that's really where the focus is going with our digital modernization right now. And those AI tools can be put on wharfs, on vessels, in the air with drones, on body-worn cameras. All of those things are enabling factors to finding efficiencies.
So as we move towards introducing AI, which is very important, I want to say it's very important to the industry for data collection, enforcement, and everything. I will be asked, is this going to add any additional cost to individual fishers, smaller fishers, and their boats to add equipment or anything like that?
Thank you for the question. No, that is not the intention, sir. As you know, license holders are all required to report on catch regardless of vessel size, but we work directly with the license holders and the associations to minimize the reporting burden and make sure that, as you noted, the technology transition for even just reporting is as simple and seamless as possible.
And I'll just follow up on that. We've only got a little while. How will concerns from fishers, especially the smaller fishers, how will they be addressed? How will they be addressed?
There's a few ways that we address them, either direct engagement with DFO. There's also through the federations, the various federations with the small independent harvesters, where that engagement has taken place. Sometimes the associations work with us to help provide education, supporting the license holders themselves to better adapt and adopt technology as they're using it in real time. But also they do directly engage DFO for support as needed. And we do have an active dialogue in that space and different support tools to help them without increasing the burden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connors. Just looking at the time here, we finished the second round. We don't have enough time to go into a proper third round, but I'm just going to give each party the opportunity to ask one question before we need to get into our votes on the supplementary estimates. So we're going to go next to Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Levesque, I want to go back to the aquatic invasive species issue. Under the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Canada committed to fight invasive species, but the government is shortchanging the fight in BC. The Okanagan Basin Water Board has committed $200,000 to work with University of BC Okanagan to develop a rapid eDNA detection tool for invasive mussel biosecurity. Is it possible to find a matching $200,000 in the $4.7 billion funding the DFO has to match the Okanagan Basin Water Board funding?
Thank you for the question and for your efforts on aquatic invasive species. We haven't seen the correspondence yet from the Okanagan Water Basin, but I commit to reviewing that correspondence with folks in the region following this conversation, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Next, prochainement, Monsieur Cormier.
Next, Mr. Cormier. Thank you. We talked a lot about arrests from the beginning. I think what we're trying to say is that we want the fisheries to be sustainable for future generations. And I didn't walk in my father's footsteps, but my family were fishers. Many people from the community, from industries, others, for example, the Attorney General. The fines given to those who breach the law sometimes is $250. Some will just go the next day to fish illegally. Do you think that if the fines were much higher, not just fines or tickets, but as we said earlier, of course, you're not going to throw a 14-year-old in jail for stealing a chocolate bar, but there needs to be some kind of consequence if it's the fifth time they do it. So would it be possible, for example, to have higher fines and also revoking permits if there are many offenses committed by the same people? Recidivism. Do you think that would help deter people from doing these things?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. You're quite right regarding the tickets or fines. That's something we often hear. The department is looking at administrative financial consequences. That would be another tool in the officer's toolbox in terms of infractions, things that might hit somebody's wallet a bit harder, especially in cases of recidivism, as my colleague stated. So that's something we're looking at right now, but it's also part of the policy review and how we manage licensing and permit rules more broadly, as you asked. Thank you very much, Mr. Cormier. And finally, we'll go to Mr. Deschênes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Mr. Patrick Amiot of the Chief Financial Officer. We see that there's about a $250 million, $247 million increase, not transfers to other departments, but expenditures. What we see that of 146 million, 142 are really earmarked more for reconciliation, progressive implementations of autonomy and self-government efforts, and so on. Could you explain to us how that money is being spent?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question. That is money in Vote 10, and it was explained by Kelly Lévesque, our Deputy Minister. There's a process in place to provide those funds, or let me go back a little bit. There are processes in place for contribution agreements to assess the requests and applications and provide the funds. Currently, we're in the process for Supplementary Estimates B. We don't have the money yet, and we need the votes on that, and after that, the money will come out. And who is that money going to? Oh, it's one question. Apologies, but if you could provide us the answer in writing, that would be appreciated.
And so that's going to finish our panel here today. We need to get to voting on the supplementary estimates at this point. In all, there are 3 votes in the supplementary estimates B, 2025-2026. Unless anyone objects, I will seek the unanimous consent of the committee to group the votes together for a decision. Is there unanimous consent to do so?
C'est pour le vote ou pour la façon de le
pour avoir tous les votes.
We want to see whether we can vote them all together. Yes?
So shall all votes referred to the committee in the supplementary estimates be for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026 carry? On division?
Pour le vote sur les crédits, est-ce qu'on peut s'entendre que ça passe sur décidence?
Oui, oui, ça c'est qu'est-ce que,
C'est ce que
M.
monsieur vient
Arnold
de
a
dire.
dit.
OK, parfait, ça va.
So on, shall I report the votes back to the House? Agreed? Okay, great. Well, I'm going to do that very quickly because we have routine proceedings happening right now. Just to say, notre prochaine réunion sera...
Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, next Tuesday, where we'll hear from our last witnesses regarding our review of the act.
Actions after the two panels on that day, as this will likely be our last meeting of 2025. So with that, meeting adjourned.